making discoveries is one of the most exciting things you can be ever part of, where we made a big discovery in the Yukon, triggered a huge staking rush, within a year had sold that company. You need to attract talent. Very well said, Daniel. I don't know, are you on the payroll or what? Very well articulated.
Okay, folks, we're sitting today with Rob McLeod. Rob McLeod is one of the co-founders of Nation Royalty, and that's just the tip of the iceberg of what he's done in his career so far. Rob has started, discovered, and exited multiple companies in the mining sector. You could say he's a legend in the entrepreneurial space when it comes to mining. I'm really excited to have this chance to sit down with him, pick his brain, see what new things he's up to, and maybe learn a few things about what's to come down the line. Try to get some inside scoops on what you're building.
Well, thanks for having me on, Daniel, and thanks for the very flattering description to my career.
Well, you've had a sale of a company that was over $1 billion. You also had a company that you took over, and within, I think, under 18 months, you were able to sell that company for over $100 million. So you've had a great track record of being able to find and unlock value in areas that are overlooked, and kind of looking at things in a unique perspective and bringing a new light to what's already been discovered or explored. So I really want to get into a few things. I want to start off with your love for geology. I feel like there's a lot of geologists who are in mining. Not all of them are super passionate about what they do, but you love looking at rocks, you love looking at the mineralization. I've seen you get excited over drill core. How did that all start? How did your love for geology start?
And again, thanks for the flattering comments. And it's funny in our careers how we cheer on all of our big successes, but we learn just as much by our failures as well too. And there's very few in the mining business that haven't had a few or mediocre successes. And when you try to approach business and life with a degree of humility, you have to look at what you've done well and what you can improve on. And so that always learning is a key component to how I continue to grow my career in the mining space. But I've been around mining and have had a passion for it, since I was old enough to listen to my dad's stories about when he worked underground in mines all throughout the Pacific Northwest, or my uncle, who was a stock promoter in the 70s through 1990s and CEO, and had lots of successes and built mines and sold companies and had other ones fail as well. And so I've always had a passion not only for the science but for the mining industry as a whole. Making discoveries is one of the most exciting things you can be ever part of. Mineral exploration is a treasure hunt. Most of the time you miss. I've drilled lots of dusters in my career, but I've also hit a few times as well too. And there's no greater feeling when a plan comes together or you get completely lucky, and it's once you have that gold fever, it's really tough to shake.
Well, take me behind the first time you came across it and the first time you got that hit. What was your first hit in the markets? Because I still remember mine. What was the first time where you made a discovery or you had that exit and you were like, now I'm hooked?
Well, there's kind of a few different ways you can be successful. You mentioned big hit in the market. When I first started my career in the 90s, and I worked for a series of major companies on different projects. But I also started investing as well too. And in the mid 90s was just a rip and bull market where there's all sorts of big discoveries were made, such as Voisey's Bay and Diavik. One of my early wins, which was a 4-bagger, was my cousin Catherine's company called Arequipa. And it could have been much, much, much larger. But, I got greedy, I got a little bit scared, and when the stock started to move, I took some profits and sold it all, and then I rolled all of my winnings into Voisey's Bay area play companies, and I lost it all. And so there's a whole series of lessons there in terms of the market side, and then through the exploration and discovery side. Again, you learn from, discoveries are really made by teams. A lot of people will take individual credit for success and for discovery. I had a tremendous team in the early 2000s where I was working with, at the time, a whole bunch of 30-something age geologists, and we had a ton of success for a company called Miramar Mining. And we made a lot of discoveries on the Hope Bay project up in the Arctic. Some were luck, some were skill, and that really helped build the confidence that, hey, I can go out and find some things myself. And then my first really, really big win was a company called Underworld Resources, where we made a big discovery in the Yukon, triggered a huge staking rush, and within a year had sold that company. And so, but
Wow.
It's also, the tough times, the late 1990s, which absolutely decimated mineral exploration. Most of my classmates that I went to school with to study geology had exited the industry
Wow.
because of tough times.
It's funny.
It's all learning.
I was talking to Ryan Waymark yesterday, and he's the president of Fuse Advisors, and he was saying that there's this lost generation, right, where we had all these folks who either went to school for geology or mining engineering, and then the market tanked. And they went into other fields and they rarely came back. So he has a whole part of his business where he coaches younger engineers on how to do simple operational things, like how to run a meeting, how to report, like all these things that were just missed because there's a big gap between those retiring and those who just came in. And it's funny you say that a lot of your friends left, but you didn't.
No, I was really blessed. I kept, where I was working for in the late 90s, the current CEO of Alamos, John McLeod, who was an early mentor. We had a junior company called Grade Resources. And, I was lucky to have a job. We were lucky to have, a few $1 million in the bank where we could go and do some exploration in Alaska. And, then through a favor, he got me on with Miramar right, as the millennium turned in the year 2000 by asking Stephen Quinn to find a job for me because that company was out of money.
Wow.
And so, we were all really thankful just to be working. But yeah, I had buddies that were out of work for a while and go work construction or go back to school and find out something else to do. But it's also, mineral exploration can be, it isn't the easiest life when you're a field geologist. You're out in the middle of nowhere, you're away from your family. You're generally uncomfortable, I'm in the Arctic and then in the deserts and clouds of mosquitoes out in the bush, and you've been there, you've seen, and so for some, they look for a little bit more stability. Companies run out of money all the time. You get laid off and have to go and try and find another job elsewhere, or have to relocate many times, and so it isn't a life for many. Or people have families and stuff like that, and they need to settle down. So often, you get that natural attrition regardless of the markets. But certainly, in the 90s, and to a degree, kind of from 2011 to 2016 or 2017, that was really rough years for many in the business as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the cyclical nature of mining makes it very difficult for there to be a big talent pool that consistently stays in it. But you did say something about your team that I want to circle back to. You were a group of 30-something-year-old geologists who made a series of good discoveries. And a lot of times when you talk to companies or you go to events for mining conferences, people will say you need a great team, you need a great asset, and you need access to capital. So, first of all, how true is that those are the three components for a successful mining company?
That's 100% the case. So there is a fourth one. It's you do have to get a little bit lucky as well too. That is the great intangible in mineral exploration and mining. But you need to attract talent. You need to attract enthusiasm. That's, if you have talent but they're cynical or they're lazy, it's you're not going to be able to get the most out of your team.
Does that go hand in hand, the cynical nature of some people and laziness, you think?
Oh, I think that's more of a psychological question, and I think in some cases for sure, but there's no substitution for enthusiasm, and whether it's on the exploration side, the desire to make a discovery or to build a great company, it's something that you want to nurture. We're in a business that, particularly through challenging times, the enthusiasm can be beat out of you. And, not just in mining, but, in life in general.
Yeah.
And so when you see that talent, you want to nurture it, you want to empower, you want to make your place of employment a place where everybody looks forward to coming into that, that office or into that camp every day. And so, there's many different ways to do that. My team, we have a lot of laughs generally at each other's expense, and even just that can make, if you have a fun place to work, is a way to not only attract but retain that talent. The second is to empower. Give people, push them into levels of responsibility where they need to hustle to be able to maintain that role. One of the challenges that our industry has faced, in the past 20 years, is that so many young executives, particularly on the exploration side, are being thrust into management roles while they're in a stage of their life where they should maybe be gathering more experience. There's one of my favorite geologists of all time is a fellow named Murray Hitzman, who used to be with the Colorado School of Mines and advised, half a dozen or more U.S. presidents on mineral exploration and mining. His line, asked, "Who's the best geologist you've ever seen, Murray?" And his is, it's an easy question. The best geologist is the one that's seen the most rocks. And so a lot of the younger, geologists that have 4 or 5 years of experience, maybe on 1 or 2 projects, thrust into VP exploration roles. It's maybe one of the reasons why our industry hasn't seen quite as many exploration successes as in previous generations.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I don't care about technology. Technology is so important to actually, not to contradict myself, but we have, on our phones access to all the information that's ever existed. That information is different than experience.
Yeah.
That information helps you, take advantage of that experience to help to help make discoveries or help to delineate mines or build successful companies.
So if we take that to a real world example, in the company that you built and sold to Newmont, do you have any stories about where you think your experience or another member of your team's experience really played into being able to advance that discovery?
Are you talking about Miramar mining?
Miramar.
I certainly didn't build it. I was part of the team that had a lot of success that facilitated it, but I would not give myself any credit for a second for that sale.
Were you a key component of planning the drilling for that?
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, there's often, again, you're capitalizing on other successes, and we discovered 2 important zones at the Hope Bay project called Nartok and Sulik. Nartok means big belly in Inuit. I always think about that one. We took a look at some of the geology and the drill results from the previous operator and worked up some really good drill targets and ended up making the discovery, adding a couple of million ounces to the inventory. And, that was all part of a long list of contributors that ultimately led to that project sale. But no, if there's anybody that would be given the, the credit, Wally Barakoff and Stephen Quinn founded the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a team of excellent managers built it up, and top of the market, managed to find an exit and sell that company.
So when you were looking at the data and when you guys were planning those drill targets, did you see any patterns from previous experiences that made you look and say, maybe we should go here?
Yeah, for sure. Well, in the case of St. Nartok, where actually it was kind of funny, it was what, my boss, one of my bosses at the time, Stephen Quinn, came down and said, yeah, we have a board meeting in 2 hours. We need drill targets for Nartok. And so, we ran around and panicked and said, okay, where can we fit a discovery? There's a whole bunch of drilling over here, a bunch more drilling over here. It doesn't really hang together. Well, here's where two magnetic lows intersect, right next to it. And there's one drill hole that had like a, big chunk of VG, and maybe it was 300 grams or so. Let's drill a fence across that magnetic low. And it ended up being the discovery. Luck was a huge component to it.
Yeah.
But the lessons were, where can you fit a deposit? Here's two geophysical indicators in terms of magnetic lows, which in volcanic rocks signify that the magnetite minerals that were there before were altered away due to hydrothermal activity. So that's an area you might want to look. And so, that was a discovery that there wasn't a whole lot of thought that went into it, but there was millions of dollars worth of data that was within 2 hours quickly processed and a drill target put together, and they went and drilled it, and it was a great discovery in 2001.
And so you've been historically a lot on the side of early stage exploration. That's kind of been your sweet spot, early to mid stage, like late stage exploration.
I've run the gamut from from advanced stage projects and take them through feasibility study and the permitting process, and I think that's part of my strengths is that I have that diverse. Early stage exploration is the most exciting and the most fun, but it's also the highest risk and the most prone to failure. But it certainly has the biggest excitement component versus doing infill drilling or whatever.
Yeah.
Advanced stage engineering, which is still interesting.
Yes.
But it doesn't have the same excitement level, you know what I mean?
So if you were to think about yourself in like I know that in the Fiore group, I kind of think of you as a partner with Frank and the other members out of this office. And then you've got this wide range of experience that comes from all the way from early stage to late stage PFS. So what do you think is what makes you stand out with this group? What makes your value unique within this group?
Well, there's two components. I am a geologist, and on the technical side, I work very closely with Ryan Waymark, who's an engineer, and we're very complementary because the ability to find or delineate or de-risk a mineral resource to the stage where it gets handed over to engineers, and they see if you can mine it at a profit. We work really well together on that component. But the other bit, and it's a bit of where the company is getting, or the group is getting a very solid reputation, is actually working and empowering Indigenous groups in capital markets. And so in 2024 we launched Nations Royalty, which is the first majority Indigenous owned public company in Canada, certainly in the royalty space. I think it's going to be a massive success. I think it'll be the biggest thing I ever do in my career.
Wow.
But, very importantly, we are empowering young Indigenous leaders. And right now within the group, there's 4 from different nations across Canada that are being part of this world. They're being part of capital markets. And, I think the impact, starting with these young Indigenous pioneers actually in the space, I think is going to be part of my personal legacy of economic reconciliation in Canada. Indigenous people need to be owners in mines and mining projects. and exploration companies, and you name it. They should be part of it, and we're going to have a much healthier and successful industry in Canada because of some of these initiatives we're working on.
Absolutely. It brings them to the table at the same level as everybody else and gives them the opportunity to be on the upside.
Yeah, to have equity.
Yeah.
And that's where, Frank became so successful because he had equity in deals.
Yeah.
And all the other, industry leaders, that's been the case. And I think it's about time that, some of these Indigenous leaders and nations are shareholders and can build up companies, have them succeed, have them fail, be part of this, of venture capital that is his goal is to build wealth, and the more self-generated wealth Indigenous groups can build, the better society we're going to have in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because Nations is essentially a royalty model where you're taking the benefit agreements that nations have been rewarded or given due to mines operating on their lands, and then rolling it up to Nations royalty and bringing all of the value of that asset to now, rather than them having to wait, whether it's decades or so on for that value to trickle in. And on top of that, you're kind of de-risking their assets because they're able to put their asset into Nations royalty, get equity in Nations royalty, and get in turn access to all your other portfolio of royalties. And together that allows them to if a mine fails or if something crashes, they still have cash on their balance sheets. They still have that asset because of Nations.
Very well said, Daniel. I don't know, are you on the payroll or what? It's very well articulated, 100%. It's the same reason why, whether you're a prospector or other royalty holders, why any royalties end up in the Francos and the Wheatons and stuff in the world. You're bringing forward all that value to today. You're diversifying the risk of, particularly for Indigenous groups that might just have one mine on their territories, or it's one mine that could be a volatile commodity, say. And bigger is unquestionably better in the royalty space. As more royalties get pooled together, the price to net asset value ratio continues to increase, where it's over 2 to 1 in the case of the big 3 royalty companies.
So they get a higher multiple on their money on top of the de-risking of their asset.
100%, yeah.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
And this company and this endeavor is very difficult for multiple reasons. One, it's never been done before. And 2 is you're dealing with all different kinds of people, all different kinds of cultures, all different kinds of beliefs. Before we wrap up, I just want to touch on what are some of your operating principles for the company and for the relationships that you guys are building at Nations?
The first and foremost is to generate returns. It has to be that for any business. That's number one. So for the shareholders, and in the case of the Nations royalty, today the Nisga'a Nation is by far the largest shareholder, owning 77% of the company. But as more Indigenous groups join the company, that percentage level is going to decrease, and of course others will increase, and the overall value will be driven to Nisga'a and other shareholders. The second principle, which it is the capacity building for Indigenous people in corporate roles. So we have a majority Indigenous management team, majority Indigenous board of directors. My role, honestly, is interim. Whether internally or externally, and likely internally, one of the current members of the team will step up into the CEO role. Because this company needs to be indigenously led. This is part of economic reconciliation. And the third is you are stronger together. We are helping Indigenous groups negotiate royalties that are fair top line royalties versus, say, net profit interest royalties that never pay out, and to explain why these are better. So we're doing that as a general service, and then if hopefully in the case of some here that they want to roll those NSRs in for shares in the company, and if not, that's fine. We have where the word gets out that we're a very positive group that can help Indigenous groups understand and the mining business a little bit better. And we're really proud of what we've been building so far.
Yeah, you guys are really in the trenches, and there's been a lot of buzz around the office on what you guys have been working on, so I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah.
But I know you can't go too much into detail into any of your operations currently because they're all CA and NDA and...
Yeah, you'll have to read about it in the news just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's been a pleasure, Rob. I really appreciate your time.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
having
much.
me, Daniel.